Affection is something most people misunderstand. It is often mistaken for the gentle touch of words, for the sweetness of compliments, or for the comforting tone of voices that tell us we are loved. But if one looks closely, words are fragile. They are temporary expressions that can change depending on mood, circumstance, or misunderstanding. Words can be spoken with sincerity, but they can also be spoken without meaning. They can comfort, but they can also deceive. And so, to believe that affection resides in words alone is to hold on to a surface reflection without ever touching the water beneath it. The true source of affection does not lie in what is said. It is found in what is felt, in what is transmitted silently, without noise, without ornament, without effort. When we try to understand affection only through language, we make it shallow. Think of the many moments in life where silence carried more depth than any speech. A hand placed gently on the shoulder, the warmth of a gaze, the presence of someone who stays when you are breaking down. These moments carry no words, yet they speak louder than any carefully chosen sentence. What makes them so powerful is that they come from a place beyond the tongue, beyond thought, beyond performance. They come from the essence of being, and that essence is far deeper than anything words can capture. The challenge arises because human beings are conditioned to rely on expression as proof. People say, "If you love me, tell me. If you care, show me in words." But affection does not require proof, because affection is not a performance. It is not something to be measured by how often it is spoken. True affection has no need to constantly declare itself, because its presence is already undeniable. It radiates in subtle gestures, in the energy that one transmits simply by being. It is not spoken, it is lived. When we strip away the desire for constant verbal reassurance, we begin to discover what is real. Affection is not a repetition of phrases. It is an alignment of energy between beings. It is the quiet vibration that connects without explanation. There is an honesty in it that cannot be fabricated. Anyone can say, "I care," but the energy behind that statement reveals the truth. Sometimes one wordless moment of presence contains more sincerity than years of spoken promises. This depth is why affection can be felt even across distance. A letter, a memory, or even a silent prayer carries energy that no sound can contain. It is why the affection of someone who is no longer alive can still be felt in the heart, because what is real does not vanish with time. It remains vibrating in the unseen, nourishing quietly without needing recognition. Affection that comes from words alone is fragile because it depends on repetition. The moment words stop, doubt begins to grow. But affection that comes from the deeper source does not depend on repetition. It is consistent because it flows from something that does not exhaust itself. It is not created by effort. It is not sustained by constant expression. It is simply present, like the warmth of the sun that does not need to tell you it is shining. To access this deeper source requires inner clarity. One cannot transmit what one does not cultivate within. If the heart is restless, if the mind is constantly demanding validation, then the expression of affection will always remain tied to words. But when there is stillness inside, when one's being itself becomes rooted in authenticity, then affection becomes effortless. It radiates without calculation, and those around can feel it without needing to ask. This is why children and animals often recognize affection more purely than adults. They are not fooled by speech. They sense energy and they respond to sincerity. They feel the difference between someone who says nice words without alignment and someone who silently radiates warmth without needing to speak. They respond not to the outer layer of communication, but to the vibration beneath it. When we begin to live in this understanding, affection transforms. It is no longer a matter of how often we say it, but how truthfully we embody it. Our presence itself becomes a transmission, a silent language understood by the heart. And in this silence, affection finds its highest form. It is no longer a temporary sound, but an enduring resonance. The mistake is to think that words are unimportant. Words have power, and they can uplift, inspire, and comfort. But they should never be mistaken as the origin. They are the surface waves, not the ocean. The ocean is the source, and the waves are only its movements. If we mistake the waves for the ocean, we remain attached to appearances. If we recognize the depth beneath, we begin to swim in the essence. The source of affection lies in stillness, in presence, in energy that flows without needing to prove itself. It is something that cannot be faked, because the vibration of authenticity always reveals itself. It is not louder when spoken, nor weaker when silent. It simply exists as a current that connects being to being, heart to heart, spirit to spirit. It requires no decoration, no explanation, no validation. It is pure in its nature, untethered by the limits of language, untouched by the fragility of words. It flows quietly, but its strength is unshakable, and those who are receptive can feel it as surely as one feels the warmth of the sun without needing it to announce its light. Love has always been one of the most misunderstood forces in human existence. We grow up hearing about it in stories, songs, and poetry, often portrayed as a feeling so overwhelming that words alone could capture its essence. Yet, when examined more deeply, we begin to realize that love is never truly measured by what is said, but by what is done. Words, after all, are easy to produce. They can be uttered without weight, repeated without meaning, and promised without intention. But actions carry the imprint of truth. They reveal what words cannot sustain. To understand love, therefore, one must look beyond declarations and into the realm of behavior, choices, and consistency. Promises are like seeds. They contain potential, but unless planted and nurtured, they will never become fruit. Many people speak of love with eloquence. They promise forever, they swear commitment, they assure presence in times of hardship. But when difficulties arrive, those promises often vanish like smoke. The true strength of love is revealed not in moments of ease, but in the way one stands firm when conditions are unfavorable. It is during those uncomfortable times, when sacrifice is demanded, when patience is tested, when giving becomes harder than taking, that the authenticity of love is measured. Love expressed through action does not need constant reassurance because it becomes visible in the smallest details. It lives in the way one listens with full attention. It resides in the effort to understand rather than judge. It shows itself in the willingness to support another even when it requires personal discomfort. A kind gesture, an act of service, a choice to prioritize another's well-being, these are the manifestations of love that no spoken promise can replicate. A word may fade from memory, but an act of genuine care leaves a lasting imprint on the soul. The danger of relying on promises lies in their comfort. A promise soothes the ear but does not always move the heart. It creates an illusion of security without delivering substance. People cling to promises because they provide hope, yet if those promises remain unfulfilled, they breed disappointment and distrust. Words can deceive, but actions are much harder to disguise. One can say, "I will be there," but the real proof lies in showing up. One can say, "I love you," but the reality of that love is proven in patience, respect, and continuous effort. It is also important to see that action is not limited to grand gestures. Society often romanticizes love through dramatic sacrifices or monumental acts, but real love is sustained through consistency in the ordinary. Bringing warmth to daily interactions, showing kindness even in moments of irritation, choosing honesty when it would be easier to conceal. These are the quiet actions that give love its foundation. A promise can impress in the moment, but only repeated action builds trust that can endure. In relationships, this distinction between promises and actions becomes critical. Many people lose themselves in waiting for words to be fulfilled, placing faith in what was said rather than what is being lived. They hold on to verbal commitments while ignoring patterns of behavior that contradict those commitments. To live wisely is to observe action more than expression. The body, the choices, the repeated decisions of a person speak with greater clarity than their lips ever could. When one recognizes this, they stop being muzzled by empty promises and start recognizing genuine love in the tangible effort that is made day by day. Love, when reduced to words alone, risks becoming performance. People may say what they know another wants to hear, not out of sincerity but out of convenience. But love expressed in action cannot be faked for long. A person may say, "You are my priority," but it is in the choices of time, attention, and sacrifice where such a statement is validated. Action is love's language, and those who understand this stop being distracted by surface declarations and begin to seek substance. The discipline required to live love through action is not small. It demands mindfulness because action requires awareness of how one's behavior impacts another. It demands consistency because real love is not occasional but enduring. It demands humility because action requires effort and sometimes self-denial. Yet this very discipline is what strengthens the bond between people. Words can touch the ears, but actions create trust, and trust is the soil in which love grows roots. It is also worth noting that love shown through action extends beyond human relationships. The way we treat ourselves, the way we engage with our environment, the way we honor our commitments in life, these too reflect love. Saying one values health while living in ways that damage the body is a broken promise to the self. Saying one respects the earth while exploiting its resources without care is a contradiction. Love of self, love of others, love of life itself must all manifest in behavior, for without action, love remains theoretical and powerless. Every action, no matter how small, is a declaration. When someone chooses to stay instead of walking away, that is love in action. When someone takes time to understand rather than rushing to judge, that is love in action. When someone endures difficulty not for personal gain, but for the sake of another's well-being, that is love in action. It is a language that requires no translation because it is universally understood. Wherever there is care, respect, patience, and sacrifice made visible, there is love, alive and undeniable. There exists a kind of power that is rarely understood, yet it surrounds every moment of our existence. It is not the kind of pound in the volume of words, in the strength of arguments, or in the insistence of being heard. It is not in the clashing of opinions, nor in the debates that attempt to establish superiority. True power often lies in the place most people overlook: silence. Silence has its own language, its own rhythm, and its own way of influencing the world without the need for force. When one begins to observe life deeply, one realizes that silence can communicate truths that speech can never carry. From the moment we are born, the world conditions us to speak, to explain, to defend, to justify. But there is very little guidance on how to remain still, how to listen, how to cultivate presence without words. Speech is a tool, but like any tool, it can be overused. When words are excessive, they lose weight. When words are careless, they injure more than they heal. When words are forced, they create resistance rather than understanding. Yet silence, when carried with awareness, creates space. In that space, the heart feels, the mind clears, and the truth arises naturally. Consider the moments in life when silence has spoken louder than any sentence. In the presence of grief, words often feel small and insufficient. But the quiet presence of another person, simply sitting in stillness, can provide more comfort than any carefully chosen phrase. In the depth of nature, standing before mountains, rivers, or a vast sky, it is silence that allows one to feel awe. No commentary is necessary, no explanation can capture what the heart already understands. Even in the practice of discipline, silence is what teaches patience, endurance, and clarity. Silence is not emptiness, though at first it may appear to be. Silence is full, but what it is full of cannot be captured by sound. It is full of potential, full of awareness, full of energy. To rest in silence is to connect with the source of being, beyond labels and concepts. Speech divides experience into fragments, naming one thing as this and another as that. Silence does not divide. Silence holds everything together in unity. The mind thrives on constant commentary, but the spirit grows in the soil of silence. There are different dimensions of silence. There is the silence of the environment, the absence of noise. This type of silence is rare in a world overflowing with stimulation, yet it can be cultivated by withdrawing into nature or creating a still space for oneself. Then there is inner silence, the quieting of the restless mind, the thoughts that endlessly move in circles, the judgments, the comparisons, the rehearsed conversations. Inner silence is deeper, more transformative, because when the mind becomes silent, the individual is no longer trapped in reactivity. Beyond these, there is a third silence, the silence of presence, where one becomes so aligned with being itself that even in action, even in words, silence flows through, shaping everything with clarity and intention. Silence does not mean weakness. In fact, silence requires a greater strength than speaking. It is easy to shout, easy to react, easy to let emotions spill out in the heat of the moment. But it takes discipline to hold back, to listen, to pause before responding. Silence sharpens perception. In silence, you observe more carefully, you hear what is not being said, you sense the emotions behind the words, the tension hidden beneath the surface. This sensitivity gives rise to understanding, and understanding is more powerful than reaction. Throughout history, the greatest lessons were often transmitted in silence. A teacher sitting quietly can awaken a student without a single word. A glance, a gesture, or the space between words can reveal more than a long lecture. The wise understand that silence is not the absence of communication. It is the highest form of communication. When silence is respected, it allows truth to reveal itself without distortion. Modern life resists silence. Noise has become a constant companion. Notifications, conversations, advertisements, background music, endless distractions. People fear silence because in silence they are confronted with themselves, the thoughts they avoid, the feelings they suppress, the questions they never ask. All of this rises when silence is embraced. But within that discomfort lies the doorway to growth. When you learn to remain silent, you learn to meet yourself. You begin to see the patterns of your own mind, the attachments that cause suffering, the illusions that drive your actions. In silence, you are no longer running away. You are standing still in the truth of your being. Silence also teaches humility. Words often come with the desire to be right, to be acknowledged, to be valued. But silence does not demand recognition. Silence does not need to prove itself. It simply is. In silence, one learns that not everything requires explanation. Not every moment demands a response, and not every challenge is resolved by argument. Silence teaches the art of surrender, not as weakness, but as wisdom. There is also a deep healing quality in silence. Just as the body heals when it rests, the mind heals when it becomes quiet. Silence reduces the noise of worry, anxiety, and overthinking. It allows the nervous system to reset, the breath to deepen, and the awareness to return to the present moment. From this place, clarity emerges. Decisions made from silence carry greater strength than those made in the rush of noise. Actions born out of silence are aligned with purpose rather than impulse. In silence, one begins to recognize that speech is only one layer of communication. Energy communicates, presence communicates, intention communicates. A single silent act of kindness can be louder than 1,000 words of praise. A moment of stillness in the midst of conflict can shift the entire direction of events. Silence reminds us that true influence is not in how much we say, but in how deeply we connect, how fully we embody truth without needing to display it. In a world overflowing with noise, distraction, and constant demands, attention has become one of the rarest forms of currency. To give someone or something your full attention is not simply a casual act. It is an offering, a gesture of recognition, and a profound expression of care. Attention, in its purest form, is more valuable than words, more impactful than material possession, and more transformative than fleeting gestures. It is the very essence of presence, the act of saying without speaking, "I see you, I hear you, and I acknowledge your existence." When we speak of attention, we often confuse it with the shallow glance of the eyes or the partial listening of the ears while our minds remain preoccupied elsewhere. But true attention is different. It is the discipline of stillness, of withdrawing from distractions, of silencing the restless movements of thought so that our focus is directed fully onto the person, task, or moment before us. In that state, attention becomes care because it honors what is present. It does not seek to change, to interrupt, to rush, or to judge. It simply holds. And in this holding, there is healing. Think of a child who excitedly brings forward a drawing, a rough sketch on crumpled paper. The child is not looking for money, nor for elaborate praise, but for your gaze. Your attention in that moment validates their effort, affirms their expression, and communicates love more deeply than any gift could. Or think of a friend going through silent struggles. They may not ask for advice, they may not even have the words to describe their pain, but your attentive presence, the willingness to sit without distraction, to listen without rushing to respond, becomes the medicine they need. It is not always solutions that heal. Often it is attention itself. Attention is care because it is rooted in presence. To be present means that you are not rehearsing the past or projecting into the future, but that you are fully available here and now. Presence requires discipline, for the mind is unruly, quick to wander, eager to chase after stimuli. Yet when we train ourselves to pay attention, we cultivate patience, compassion, and deep awareness. In every relationship, whether with others or with ourselves, the lack of attention breeds disconnection. We miss the subtle signals, the unspoken needs, the quiet opportunities. But where attention flows, connection deepens, trust strengthens, and understanding grows. Attention also shapes the inner landscape. The quality of your life depends on where your attention rests. If it is constantly scattered across worries, comparisons, and endless distractions, life feels fragmented and heavy. But when attention is consciously directed toward growth, gratitude, and awareness, the experience of life becomes more whole. To care for yourself, therefore, begins with attention to your breath, to your posture, to your thoughts, to your emotions. This attention does not mean obsession or over-analysis. It means noticing without neglect, seeing without judgment, and allowing space for transformation to occur naturally. In the modern world, the scarcity of attention is evident. Devices compete for our gaze, notifications fracture our focus, and the culture of speed pushes us to multitask endlessly. Yet every time we divide our attention, the depth of care diminishes. We may sit with a loved one, but our hand reaches for the phone. We may hear words, but our mind is elsewhere. The cost of this scattered attention is disconnection. People feeling unseen, unheard, and unvalued. To reclaim attention as care is to resist this culture of fragmentation. It is to remember that the most meaningful gift you can offer another human being is not material wealth, but the fullness of your presence. Consider also the power of attention in nature. When you walk through a forest and give your attention to the movement of the leaves, the sound of the birds, the texture of the earth beneath your feet, you begin to feel a bond with the natural world. This bond nurtures respect, care, and a sense of belonging. Without attention, nature becomes background noise. With attention, it becomes a teacher, a companion, a mirror of life's wisdom. In this way, attention does not only express care for people, but also for the world we inhabit. Attention is not passive. It is an active energy. When you focus on another being, you are transferring energy, creating a space where they feel safe enough to reveal themselves. This is why attention heals, because it is energy consciously offered, free of judgment, free of distraction. In the same way, when you turn attention inward, you create space within yourself. Old wounds rise, long suppressed feelings surface, forgotten dreams reappear. And by giving them attention, you are caring for parts of yourself that have long been neglected. It is often said that love is shown through action, through giving, through sacrifice. Yet beneath all these expressions lies the foundation of attention. Without attention, gifts feel hollow. Without attention, words lose their sincerity. Without attention, presence becomes absence. To truly care is not to do more, but to be fully here, fully aware, fully engaged. In moments of stillness, when you sit quietly and allow your breath to anchor you, attention reveals its deeper dimension. It is not only about noticing what is outside, but also about recognizing what stirs within. The mind, when restless, jumps endlessly between thoughts. But when trained, it can become like a steady flame, unwavering, warm, illuminating. This steady flame is the attention that turns into pure care, a care that does not demand, does not control, but simply honors. Attention is the root of all meaningful connection. It is the silent declaration of value, the invisible thread that ties us to each other and to the world. Where attention goes, care follows. And where care flows, growth and healing naturally emerge. The human heart is not limited to the organ that sustains life within the body. It is a vast field, a landscape of experiences, emotions, and wisdom that stretches beyond the boundaries of what the eyes can see and what the mind can immediately comprehend. When we speak of the heart, we are not only referring to something biological, but to the innermost space where joy and sorrow, courage and fear, hope and despair all converge. Within this vastness lies the true nature of being human, the capacity to hold both the light and the shadow without collapsing under their weight. The vastness of the heart is revealed in its ability to expand in response to pain. Often when one suffers, the first instinct is to contract, to shield oneself, to guard against further harm. Yet paradoxically, it is in moments of great struggle that the heart shows its real dimension. A heart that has suffered deeply also has the potential to love more deeply. Every heartbreak, every disappointment, every lost tears open the walls of limitation, making space for something greater to enter. The pain becomes the teacher, and the expansion of the heart becomes the lesson. It is vast because it can hold contradictions. The heart does not demand that life be one thing. It allows grief and gratitude to coexist. It allows love to persist even when it has been wounded. It allows forgiveness to bloom even in the soil of betrayal. The human mind often struggles with contradictions, wanting clarity, wanting things to be either right or wrong, good or bad. But the heart is not confined by such rigid categories. It is able to embrace paradox because its nature is not about dividing but about unifying. Within this vastness lies a profound mystery. No matter how much the heart has given, it is never emptied. Love, compassion, and kindness are not resources that deplete with use. The more they are extended, the more they seem to grow. A person who offers love endlessly finds themselves with more love, not less. A person who forgives repeatedly discovers that their capacity to forgive deepens. The heart operates with a law different from the material world. It is not bound by scarcity, but flourishes in abundance. The vastness of the heart is also reflected in its silence. Beyond the noise of emotions and thoughts, beyond the turbulence of desires and fears, there exists a silent core within the heart. This silence is not emptiness, it is fullness. It is the quiet field from which clarity arises, from which strength is drawn, from which wisdom flows. To access this silence, one must be willing to sit with stillness, to embrace solitude, and to allow the distractions of the outer world to fade. It is in this inner sanctuary that one discovers that the heart is not only vast but boundless. When the heart opens to its vastness, the way one perceives others changes. Strangers no longer appear as distant beings, they are recognized as part of the same fabric. Compassion arises naturally because the separation between self and other begins to dissolve. The suffering of another is not something outside of oneself, but something felt within the same field of awareness. The vast heart has the capacity to include, and in that inclusion lies the true essence of connection. This expansiveness also brings resilience. A narrow heart shatters easily because it cannot carry much. But a vast heart absorbs difficulties without breaking. It bends, it stretches, it weathers storms, and still it remains whole. This resilience is not about becoming hard or unfeeling, but about being spacious enough to hold pain without being consumed by it. The vast heart does not run from challenges. It transforms them into fuel for growth. There is also a creative power that flows from the vast heart. When one acts from this space, actions carry a different quality. They are not driven by fear, not controlled by ego, but guided by something higher. Art, music, poetry, even the simple act of kindness, all emerge with greater depth when they arise from a heart that has discovered its own vastness. Creativity then is not a performance, but a natural overflow of inner abundance. To recognize the vastness of the heart requires trust. The trust that one does not need to hold back love in order to be safe. The trust that vulnerability is not weakness but strength. The trust that even in moments of deep pain, the heart has the capacity to expand further. With trust, one begins to open more fully, allowing the natural spaciousness of the heart to reveal itself layer by layer. The vastness of the human heart is not a concept to be understood, but an experience to be lived. It reveals itself in small acts. A smile offered to a stranger, patience in the face of frustration, forgiveness given when none was asked for, compassion shown to someone in pain. Each of these acts stretches the heart, widening its capacity to hold life in all its complexity. When we begin to sense this vastness, we see that the heart is not merely personal but universal. It is the same force that connects all beings, the same current of compassion that moves through humanity, the same silent strength that sustains life. The individual heart is vast because it is connected to the great heart of existence itself. What beats within us is not separate from what beats within the world. The human heart is vast because it carries within it the possibility of boundless love, infinite compassion, and endless resilience. It is vast because it transcends limitation and narrowness, because it knows how to expand instead of contract, because it does not collapse even under the heaviest burdens. The vast heart is the true center of human strength, the space where suffering is transformed, where contradictions are held, and where silence becomes the greatest teacher. Affection is often imagined as something loud, visible, and easily recognizable. Many expect it to arrive with words of affirmation, with open gestures, or with clear demonstrations of love. But the truth is that much of life's affection does not arrive in obvious ways. It hides in silence, in small actions, in the spaces between words, and in the gestures so subtle that they can be missed if one is moving too fast or if one's awareness is clouded. Recognizing unseen affection is not a matter of demanding louder expressions, but of sharpening one's awareness, slowing down enough to notice what is already present, and cultivating the sensitivity to understand the language that is not spoken but lived. There are those who will never tell you directly what you mean to them, yet they will show it in the consistency of their presence. They may not speak grand declarations of love or care, but they make sure you are not left unsupported. They may not offer constant attention in obvious forms, but they quietly stand behind you, ensuring that when you stumble, they are there to hold the ground steady. This form of affection cannot be recognized with a distracted mind because it exists in layers of subtlety. It requires awareness to realize that even silence can be full of care, that even the absence of words may be overflowing with attention. Awareness is the bridge that connects perception with reality. Without it, one remains blind to the deeper currents of human connection. Imagine sitting near a river. The surface may seem still, calm, almost motionless. But beneath, entire movements of water flow, unseen by the eye unless one looks carefully. Affection is often like that current. If one only waits for the waves to crash loudly on the surface, one misses the strength of the flow that was always moving beneath. The eyes that do not see are not the eyes that are blind. It is awareness that makes the difference between blindness and vision. In daily life, affection can take the shape of ordinary acts. The way someone listens without interrupting. The way food is prepared with care even if no words accompany it. The way a door is held open or a task is quietly completed to reduce another's burden. None of these gestures demand attention, they ask for awareness. The human tendency is to search for affection where it is most decorated, with gifts, with attention seeking, with the loud display of emotions. Yet such forms are not the only ones that exist, nor are they always the most authentic. Much of real affection lives where there is no need for recognition. And yet, if one's awareness is sharpened, even the smallest of these moments shines brightly. To cultivate this awareness, the mind must learn to slow down. In the rush of expectations, one becomes blind. A hurried mind is like a clouded mirror. It cannot reflect clearly what is before it. By pausing, by breathing, by learning to observe without judgment, awareness becomes sharper. And as awareness grows, the unseen becomes visible. Suddenly, the quiet presence of another begins to feel like warmth. The unspoken care in daily actions begins to appear like whispers of love. What was always there begins to reveal itself, not because it changed, but because one has finally learned to look. Unseen affection is not only about others, it is also about oneself. Many are unaware of the affection life itself gives them daily. The sunlight that rises without demand, the air that fills the lungs without cost, the body that continues to carry one forward even when neglected. These are also forms of affection, yet they are rarely noticed. Life itself shows constant care, but without awareness it appears ordinary, almost invisible. By becoming aware of these quiet offerings, gratitude arises naturally, and with gratitude, the unseen affection of existence becomes undeniable. Awareness is both the key and the training. It requires practice to perceive beyond appearances. The untrained mind demands clarity in the form of direct expression. But the trained mind learns that clarity does not always come from volume. It often comes from stillness. Just as one hears the faintest whisper only when one is silent, so too does one recognize subtle affection only when one is inwardly quiet. Silence within makes the outer expressions louder, not because they increase, but because the capacity to perceive deepens. When awareness sharpens, even absence becomes a sign. One can see affection not only in presence, but in restraint. Sometimes, love shows itself not by stepping forward, but by stepping back, not by giving more words, but by offering space. These are paradoxes the untrained mind misses, but the aware mind understands. Absence can be presence in another form. Distance can be closeness if understood correctly. This requires the openness to see that affection does not follow only one script. It writes itself in countless ways, many of them invisible unless one learns how to read. Recognition of unseen affection deepens connection. It prevents one from undervaluing what is present. Many relationships collapse not because affection was absent, but because it was invisible to those who never learned to see. They kept waiting for louder demonstrations while overlooking the quiet consistencies. They mistook silence for neglect when in fact it was filled with patience. They interpreted restraint as coldness when in truth it was an act of care. Awareness prevents these misinterpretations. Awareness reveals what is real, not just what is obvious. And so, the practice becomes clear to sharpen awareness so that affection in all its forms can be seen. To learn to observe not only the visible but also the invisible currents that flow beneath. To notice the warmth in presence, the intention in action, the care in silence, the support in restraint. In this way, unseen affection no longer remains unseen. It becomes part of one's lived reality, part of one's daily recognition, part of one's understanding of how life, constantly speaks in ways that the unaware mind misses, but the aware heart receives.